Hi, it's Katrina.
Number 10. The Tenemore Crater. The Tenemore Crater in Mauritania isn't necessarily creepy, but it is extraordinarily unusual. It's one of the most excellent preserved craters on the planet, and it's hidden in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The crater is almost perfectly circular, looking like a cigar burn in the middle of the flat and empty wasteland that is the Sahara. But on the ground, things look much different than in satellite images. The crater is over 1 mile wide, with its rims rising a whopping 360 feet high. On the ground, it almost looks like the mouth of a forgotten volcano. The inside of the crater is filled with about 1,000 feet of sediment. It's like a giant bowl in the desert that sand has been blowing into for thousands of years. Scientists debated what caused the crater for a long time before finally settling on an answer. At first, they thought it was a volcano because of basalt-like rocks that were scattered around the edge of the crater. But in more recent years, closer examinations have revealed that the hardened lava was in fact rock that melted in the intense energy exchange during the meteorite impact. This was a place where a huge space rock hit the planet between 10,000 and 30,000 years ago. One thing scientists don't know is what happened when the meteorite smashed into this part of the Sahara Desert. Considering it was a giant space rock hitting the surface of the planet that annihilated the dinosaurs, it's safe to say there were some major consequences here. Such a huge impact event would have caused a cataclysm of unimaginable proportions. Given that the meteorite impact was upwards of 10,000 years ago, it fits perfectly with some legends of the ancient world, in particular the legend of Atlantis and the biblical tale of the flood. Many Christian scholars believe the flood that wiped the creepy giants known as the Nephilim off the face of the earth was about 10 or 12,000 years ago. This is the same timeline given for Atlantis being destroyed by a flood. There is a very good chance that when the Tenemore Crater was formed, the force of the impact caused a monumental tsunami, maybe even more than one, resulting in global devastation. However, keep in mind this is all speculation and hasn't been scientifically proven. And now for number 9. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Becky Vineyard for the super thanks and for supporting this channel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and join the family. We'd love to have you. Number 9. Aliens in Algeria. Conspiracy theorists are going crazy over the alleged discovery of an ancient alien UFO found in the desert of Algeria. The supposed UFO was spotted thanks to Google Earth, with self-proclaimed experts calling the object H666. The user behind the discovery claims that there is an alien ship buried beneath the sands of the Sahara. His name is Scott C. Waring, and he is a self-proclaimed UFO hunter, but he isn't a real archaeologist. But a lot of people are taking him very seriously. According to what Scott said about his most recent find, there is a 5-pointed object on the edge of Algeria. It's not a metallic flying spaceship like you might be imagining, but a piece of land shaped like a pentagram or a starfish. Scott does have a point that the piece of land looks unusual compared to the desert surrounding it, but underneath the dirt, sand, and microorganisms, Scott thinks there is an ancient spaceship. He believes the ship has been buried over the past several thousand years, and that over time, land has accumulated over the ship, making it look kind of like a hill. As far as we know, nobody has gone out to physically explore the anomaly. Some have commented that there does appear to be moss growing around the object, which would suggest biological material. Some even wilder guesses are that the object is connected to underground passages, and that the aliens are still there, hiding beneath the desert. All of these claims are unfounded, but until someone goes out there with a shovel and starts digging, we just can't know for sure. For all we know, there could be preserved alien bodies mummified beneath the sand, hidden for the past 10,000 years. Number 8. Tassili Najer. To the casual observer, Tassili Najer is an inhospitable stretch of desert with nothing of worth. It's dry, it's miserable, and you can get a sunburn in about 30 seconds flat. This harsh piece of the Sahara is in Algeria, right along the borders of Libya, Mali, and Niger. It covers an area of 28,000 square miles and is home to pretty much nothing but sandstone. But if you take a closer look, you'll see the ancient pieces of artwork etched into the miles of stone. A whopping 15,000 ancient cave drawings can be found in Tassili, Niger, and many of them are so baffling that scientists don't even know what to make of them. The cave paintings and rock art can be found throughout the entire region. Some are hidden deep in caves, while others are inside the crevices of crumbling stone mounds. Scientists first stumbled upon the works of art in 1910, and new ones are being discovered all the time. Some believe the pictures are nothing more than the creative expression of prehistoric desert tribes, but there are those who wholeheartedly believe the paintings reveal a secret history of alien visitors to planet Earth. Tassili, Niger is an official UNESCO World Heritage Site. Science tells us that the rock paintings, engravings, and doodles date as far back as 12,000 years. That would have been right around the time, either directly before or directly after, that the nearby Tenemore Crater was formed. UNESCO says the open-air museum tells the story of the people of the Sahara and that it can be divided into individual periods. The oldest period is known as the Wild Fauna period, which occurred between 10,000 and 6,000 BC. This was when the desert people were painting hippos, rhinos, elephants, and other massive beasts on the rocks in the Sahara, many of which are unidentifiable. And this all took place way before the Sahara was completely dry. Then there was the Roundhead period between 8,000 and 6,000 BC, which overlapped with the Wild Fauna period. This is the stretch of time that receives the most controversy. For about 2,000 years, the desert dwellers painted bizarre figures with circular heads and no features. These weren't animals, and they didn't exactly look like humans. Many researchers believe that these depictions were of some creepy unknown beings, humanoid monstrosities wearing what could be interpreted as gloves, helmets, and full-on spacesuits. Many have compared the drawings of these figures to primitive pictures of modern astronauts. There is no way of saying for sure that the people of the Sahara had contact with aliens and drew them on cave walls, but at the same time, there is no proof against it either. One of the weirdest and creepiest images by far is a drawing that you're going to have a hard time believing. The drawing appears to show several human women being dragged into what almost looks like a spaceship. These women are being herded like cattle into the craft, led by a towering figure wearing what looks like a fishbowl on his head. Take from that what you will, but you have to admit, very unusual. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. Number 7. The Tahouh Not Mummy. In 1958, Professor Fabrizio Mori discovered one of the creepiest mummies ever. In a small and desolate cave in Wan Muhajjag, located in the Libyan desert, the professor came across the mummified remains of a small child. It was an astounding discovery, and one that continues to intrigue the scientific community. The child's remains are still on display all these years later at the Asaraya Alhambra Museum in Tripoli. The cave in which the youngster was found was occupied throughout prehistory. Its walls were decorated in ancient images of cattle, strange beasts, and people time has since forgotten. There was enough to see without digging around, but the professor wanted to find out what was hidden underneath the sand and dust of the cave's floor. So he began to dig through the cavern's soft bottom, and sure enough, he came across a bundle. The bundle was incredible and was the last thing the professor thought he'd find. Wrapped in goat skin was the carefully prepared mummy of the child, its entrails removed and replaced with wild plants. Scientists think the herbs used to stuff the child's remains were likely chosen to aid in preservation. Basically, they were chosen on purpose to make a mummy. After extensive investigations, we know the child was about 3 years old when they died. Radiocarbon dating proved the child lived about 5,400 years ago. That makes it older than the mummies from ancient Egypt, roughly 1,000 years older than the Pyramid of Khufu. It's amazing because the people who went through all the trouble of mummifying this child were likely little more than camel herders. They were nomadic humans who roamed across North Africa back when the Sahara wasn't fully a desert yet. Somehow, simple nomadic herders had their very own recipe for mummification. They knew how to embalm, how to properly cover the flesh with antelope skin, and how to preserve the remains with the proper leaves. And it worked, with the primitive technique protecting the child for almost 6,000 years. Number 6. The abandoned city of Jato. Deep in the Sahara Desert is a creepy abandoned ruin called Jato. It's in the country of Niger, way in the middle of nowhere. This is a place not many humans will see in their lifetime. Even the bravest of travelers don't typically find themselves in the central Sahara, never mind in the ghost city of Jato. The abandoned city is a true enigma. It's named after the Jato plateau that it sits on, but what researchers don't know is what its real name was. These structures aren't that familiar, meaning researchers haven't been able to identify the civilization that made this city based on its architecture. The ruins appear to be at least 1,000 years old, built when the Sahara received much more water and was very fertile. The city was once fortified with tall walls and strong towers. There were houses built all around the central part of the fortification, and there seemed to be an emphasis put on local defense. This may have been a city that attracted unwanted attention because of its wealth. Archaeologists have found tons of food storage buildings, meaning the people here were obviously well fed. As for construction materials, there isn't much in the desert. The empty city was built from palm tree trunks, mud, and sand. It was built so big, though, that even today, its ruins dominate the landscape. We know absolutely nothing about the city's origins, only that about 500 years ago, the Kanuri people of the Sahara found the ruins and moved in. It may have been their ancestors that built the city, but that wouldn't make much sense, considering they aren't known for any other monumental constructions. But 5 centuries ago, shortly after the Kanuri moved in, they left. The desert was simply too barren, and there was no food or water, so the city was left to become a dark and creepy shell of what it once was. Who do you think built the ancient city of Jato? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Number 5. Crocodile Terrors of the Sahara. In 2019, archaeologists from the University of Hinan in Spain were performing excavations in Egypt, and amazingly, they found a tomb containing the remains of almost a dozen crocodile mummies. These crocodiles once prospered in the Nile River. In the days of the pharaohs, up until 2,000 years ago, the Nile was still a source of life and was rich in biodiversity. There were killer crocs and there were far more birds, and in general, life flourished in this part of the Sahara. It was a much different place than it is today. The ancient Egyptians had a fascination with crocodiles and would often sacrifice them to their crocodile god, Sobek. After the crocodiles were sacrificed with the instruction of a designated priest, their bodies would be meticulously preserved as mummies and deposited in their own tombs. This was a way to pay the utmost respect to Sobek. But here's where things get prehistoric. Crocodiles have been in Egypt since long before humans began worshipping them as gods. The Sahara has been home to crocodiles for many millions of years. A group of paleontologists recently found what they say could be the largest sea-dwelling crocodile known to science in the Tunisian desert, not far from Egypt. The prehistoric crocodile was over 30 feet in length and weighed an astounding 3 tons. The creature's skull was even the size of a human being, and so the researchers named the species Macamosaurus rex. One of the scientists involved in the study, Federico Fanti, said the crocodile was almost the size of a bus. Macamosaurus rex is only one example of the creepy creatures that once ruled the Sahara Desert. It's fitting that the Egyptians chose to worship the creatures so fervently since they have been such a large part of the ecosystem for so long. Number 4. Prehistoric Warfare. At the edge of the Sahara Desert in northern Sudan, archaeologists discovered human remains dating back 13,000 years. In 2014, a fresh analysis of the remains showed that the dead people were likely part of a primitive African war. The finding came as a bit of a shock, since it seems to be evidence of the oldest large-scale conflict in human history. The remains were originally found in 1964 in a prehistoric cemetery in Sudan, and they were dug out by American archaeologist Fred Wendorf. UNESCO is behind the funding for the excavations, and it was all a huge success. At the time, this was the oldest cemetery ever found in the Nile Valley. But then there came another discovery in Kenya, with archaeologists stumbling upon the site of an ancient massacre near Lake Turkana. Human skeletons were found with their skulls crushed, and they had blades stuck in their bones. Researchers also found over 20 weapon fragments. This was labeled the earliest known warring hunter-gatherers in human history. But the find in Sudan was different, because the dead were found in a graveyard graveyard, suggesting some sort of settled society. Sadly, further investigation revealed that 45% of the people in the cemetery died violently. Research done by John Moores University showed that the victims were from two different population groups. Some were from sub-Saharan Africa, while others were from North Africa. It's still not clear what happened here, but it looks like the first known violent clash between two different ethnic groups using weapons, such as spears and arrows. Number 3. Stone Age skeletons. In Libya's Sahara Desert, archaeologists found a group of 20 skeletons from the Stone Age at an empty rock shelter. The bones proved to be a massive mystery because they span about 4,000 years. These 20 skeletons were buried here periodically between 8,000 years ago and 4,200 years ago. That's an extremely long time to use a single burial site, especially since it's filled with so few people. Archaeologist Mary Ann Tafuri from the University of Cambridge says it must have been a place of memory. This seemingly ordinary rock shelter was kept in the minds of the desert people who lived here for so many generations, it's almost unimaginable. It was used for 40 centuries, and yet only 15 people were buried inside the stone shelter. The other 5 were buried just outside under giant stones. The individuals that were buried inside were all women and children, while the 5 outside were men. It's all incredibly strange and seems to point to some form of ritual activity. There was most likely some strange belief system in place here, and maybe even a religion we know nothing about. But the dry and dusty bones weren't the only things found here. The archaeologists also uncovered huts nearby, complete with pots, dairy products, and animal bones. The rock shelter may have been a sacred burial place, but just outside was a primitive village. Number 2. Ancient river monster. Morocco was once home to the largest predator that ever walked the planet. Recent fossil discoveries from the Sahara have revealed that a massive, creepy reptile once stalked the waterways of prehistoric Africa. The discovery came in the form of fossilized bones from a 95-million-year-old Spinosaurus tail. The unusual predator was a ferocious hunter in the Cretaceous period, weighing up to 7 tons and growing an estimated 50 feet. According to these measurements, it was bigger than the T-Rex and the ferocious Giganotosaurus. Its mouth was a pit of death, filled with teeth that could crush bone and destroy even the most armored dinosaurs. The Spinosaurus was a very bizarre creature. It was terrifying and ugly, and what made it even scarier is that it was absolutely massive. But it wasn't the only one prowling the Sahara 95 million years ago. Paleontologists believe southeastern Morocco was the most dangerous place on the planet during the Cretaceous period. The Spinosaurus lived here, and so did other apex predators like the Bahariasaurus and the Carcharodontosaurus, both of which could grow up to 40 feet long. Even crazier is that paleontologists have found very little evidence of herbivores living in this part of the world. Instead, the Sahara was populated almost entirely by carnivores. It was about as brutal as it could get here, since every living creature would have been trying to eat each other. It definitely wasn't a place you'd want to find yourself if you lived during the Cretaceous. Number 1. The Tomb of Queen Tin Hinan. In the mountainous region of Hogar in southern Algeria, in the sweeping sands of the Sahara Desert, a tomb was found in 1925. Archaeologist Byron Kounde Prorok was behind the monumental discovery. He breached the entrance of the tomb and found the amazingly preserved body of a woman, buried with a wealth of jewelry. This was just a few years after the discovery of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter, and everyone was fascinated with ancient Egypt. For that reason, the remains of this mystery woman went largely unannounced. Nobody seemed to care, and even today, the Tuareg queen Tin Hinan is hardly famous. Byron Kounde Prorok was one of the original tomb raiders, a real Indiana Jones type. He was fascinated with ancient legends and scoured the Sahara Desert in search of treasure and myth. He came upon the location of the tomb by pure determination. After its discovery, he was told by the locals it belonged to Tin Hinan. Her name translates to "she of the tents," and it's believed she was the mightiest ruler of the Tuareg nation. There's almost nothing in the way of written records regarding this ancient desert queen. We hardly even know when she was alive, though it was sometime between the 3rd and 5th century AD. Her story has been passed down through the generations, and it's said that Hinan united the Tuareg people. These people still exist today and have lived nomadic lives in the Sahara for centuries. She traveled through Algeria, Libya, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger with her entourage of servants, maids, and mighty troops. The nomadic kingdoms of Africa typically didn't live in a single city and instead moved in large caravans. Then, when her time came to an end, Hinan was buried in a tomb that scientists say may have started as a Roman fort when they invaded the Sahara in 19 BC. However, there is no proof that the tomb belongs to Hinan or that she was a real historical person. For all scientists know, the tomb belonged to a different woman from high society in ancient Africa, but we should probably trust the word of the locals. What do you think? Thanks for watching. Would you be brave enough to go out and explore the Sahara Desert? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon. Bye!